Welcome to Radio Pi, everybody. I'm Nick D'Orazio from OSI Soft, which is now part of AVEVA. Our guests today are from Riverside Public Utilities Department, and like a lot of folks in operations, they are doing digital transformation by making better use of their sensor-based data. Now, what they're doing is they have to work closely with their Board of Public Utilities on expenditures. So they track it in a way that I think you're going to find very, very interesting. So let's start by the quick overview of RPU. It's provided water and electric service since 1895 in the Inland Empire region of Southern California. And their current service area population is more than 325,000. Our first guest is Jennifer Tavaglione. She's a principal project manager. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning.
And also as our co-host today, we have Gary Wong from OSI Soft. He's an industry principal here. Good morning, Gary.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me here.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. And we're going to introduce some more folks as we go along. Jennifer, can you describe briefly what you're doing with sensor-based data?
Sure. So it started for our utility, Riverside Public Utilities, back in 2015. When we rolled out a strategic technology plan, it basically outlined strategic investments for us in new operational technologies. We identified 22 operational technology projects with the intent of implementing them over a period of 10 years. So one of the most critical projects for us and foundational projects was the operational data management system. So that was really foundational for us to serve as a data hub or central repository, allowing us to collect and analyze and visualize operational data. And for us, an effective ODMS basically was meant to manage large amounts of data across multiple systems and work groups, and then also help staff turn the data into actionable information to drive critical business decisions. Sure. For our ODMS system, we selected the PI system, and so PI is actually that data hub that we were looking for. So we implemented PI in 2016. So July of 2016, we entered into an enterprise agreement, a 5-year enterprise agreement with OSI Soft, and we have been using the PI system as our basically our operational data management system to organize that data and make data-driven decisions based on what were previously disparate systems, now all feeding data into the PI system for analyzing that information.
Okay. Any ROI you can report?
So yes, we actually have tracked very closely all of the dashboards and reports and information that we're now getting out of PI. So again, we started this project in 2016, and in 2019, we basically had a 3-year report that we put together that tracked the ROI. So we basically went out to our end users, made a list of all the dashboards and all the reports and all the efficiencies that they had gained from using PI, and we put that into a report and did some detailed analysis on it. And we found that at that time, our return on investment for the PI system was over $672,000 a year. Since then, we have continued to track our ROI, and we are about to present to our board a 2021, a 5-year report that now the the ROI has grown even further, an additional $640,000 a year, which makes that total over $1.3 million a year that we have calculated as far as savings for the PI system.
Wow, that's fantastic, Jennifer. I wish all our customers did that. Great job.
So can you describe, I mean, what kind of things do you have to track to get that kind of accuracy? I'm curious.
So I'll let Brando go into a little more detail on that in a future response, but basically we used quantitative factors, primarily reduction in staff time. So the amount of time individual staff members were taking to complete tasks. So we captured time savings for each dashboard that we created in PI, and we multiplied the hours saved per year by the average hourly rate of that staff position responsible for the task, and adjusted it by the payroll burden multiplier. So other quantitative benefits that have also been realized that are not typically calculated in the ROI, such as reduced truck roll to investigate problems, reduce operating costs, and reduce paper waste. We didn't actually capture those numbers, so we actually think that the ROI is higher than what we're reporting. We only reported really the staff savings and those hard numbers that we could find. There are also numerous qualitative benefits being derived from the system, which are more difficult to calculate as tangible savings, and those are basically increased visibility into the system, avoided costs for potential regulatory fines or lawsuits, reduced lengths of outages, fewer customer complaints, and things like that really we couldn't calculate. But again, we feel like the ROI is much higher than that 1.3 million.
So let's bring in now Administrative Analyst Brando Crozier. Hello, Brando.
Hello. How you doing?
Oh, we're good. Thanks for joining us. So you were a key player in kind of validating what that ROI was, the numbers that you submitted to this Public Utilities Board. Is that what, am I getting Board of Public Utilities? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you describe what kind of things that you were looking for?
Well, a lot of things that we were looking for is just making sure that we were still improving operational efficiencies. A lot of what Jennifer had pointed out was reducing staff time. And if we could recognize operational costs, sometimes a lot of that was harder to put on paper, but we knew that we could at least share this important language of time saved. Other things that we would look for and we would still pursue if it was hard to quantify was good asset management or system reliability and the impacts that those could have. We would record that and present that, but sometimes it just didn't come along with a number, but still has a lot of value.
So do you have any advice you can give people who are, just trying to do this on their own and want to build in kind of the interest, the engagement that you've got at RPU?
So some things we did for gathering the data, sometimes it takes a lot of times of really working with people. Some programs that we did, we created our own little training program within the utility to get people a good idea of what Pi could do, what they could even do with Pi easily. Things, we showed them Data Link and we showed them Pi Vision. Kind of tried to show them these ways of empowering themselves. And some people really were able to take off with that. Others were at least able to see that, and it would get them excited about it. So then as they would bring up possible solutions, we could start asking them, how long they spend doing that from the beginning. I've definitely found through the personal experience, kind of asking them those questions in the beginning has been able to get answers better than waiting until it was over. Because once it's over and they're starting to have the new solution, then you can follow up and ask them, well, how long are you spending doing that thing now? And usually they become very excited in sharing that information. So, really empowering people and then making sure that you keep open communication with them all the time can really make this easier.
Brando, I just wanted to know, was that way of thinking already there, or did that type of culture, was that fostered over time? The empowering people, having them actively participate, that's not always easy to find at utilities sometimes. So it sounds like that the way that they're thinking, the way, the whole culture, I was just kind of curious, was that already there, or was that something that changed and grew over time?
No, I feel that Jennifer really had come up with the idea that we should pass along this training and get people engaged. And I think, but as soon as that happened, our team, Carey, Wes, me, and our consultants, we had really worked together to make sure to keep doing that. And as people started to ask questions, we would sometimes find an excuse to do it again. And I think that has really helped build that culture. So we've watched it develop from this and been able to push it into other technologies that we've been trying to work with, which we'll talk about a little bit, I think, later with Power BI and stuff like that.
Gary, in addition to that, to answer your question, I think when we started this 5 years ago, we really were looking for groups or managers that were the most interested and had the biggest problems to solve, right? So we started, and Robin will talk more about this, but we started in water operations where they had a huge problem to solve. They had a ton of data. They were manually calculating it, and they were the most interested in moving forward. And we also could see that if we were able to accomplish, streamlining their workflows, that they would have a story to tell others in the utility to get them excited about using Pi as well. So we started with that, and that really trickled down to other managers seeing the benefit that water operations attained, and then really being interested in doing that for their own group. So it really started a trickle-down effect. And then from that point on, we really prioritized our work based on value. So if we saw a problem that, for example, Ivan's group was spending 15 minutes every hour running a report and manually calculating in Excel, we made that high priority because we saw the potential for that ROI and that big savings for that group. So we really since then have prioritized that, the work that we do, because we're a limited number of people, we can only do so much. And especially in the beginning, there was a ton of interest. Once they started seeing the value of Pi, we prioritized the work based on where do we see the most value and the most time savings. So that helped us prioritize the work and also obtain that ROI that we've seen. Any operational savings from the utility that we attain, that gets passed on to our customers. So if we can reduce costs, we can operate more efficiently, we can reduce truck rolls, any of those savings get passed on to our customers, in the form of not increasing rates in the future.
So let me ask now about these savings. What is it about the savings that has allowed you to do maybe stuff that you weren't able to do, and especially documenting the savings the way you did? So I want to bring in Ed Cortez. He's a principal electrical engineer. Hello, Ed.
Hi, Nick.
About these savings, can you tell me a little bit about the ODMS system in general? How did it get started, the operational data management system? Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. What occurred was that one of our departments, our water departments, had already had purchased Pi. The electric group, which I belong to, started investigating whether we should join in that venture. But as we moved along to see, what the capabilities of with the Pi software, we started brainstorming more into, what other things can we do with this? So to put you in perspective, RPU, like other utilities of our size, has electric, water, generation, and other departments that use information systems, applications, and databases to support our daily business processes. Well, what occurs is these applications and databases consist of commercial off-the-shelf applications that were sometimes outdated and it was hard to get access to. We also had internal developed applications and spreadsheets and databases at remote locations. So by having all these different formats, they were not interchangeable, which made reporting, analyzing, and just reviewing data very cumbersome. So the lack of a central data management system delayed our decision-making processes. So once we got Pi and we're able to, each group look at their system and see what they needed, it just made the decision-making process simpler and quicker, and we could, instead of waiting days or weeks to identify an issue, we could do it within an hour or quicker.
Now, I know some of our customers tell us they have like capital expenditure projects that they actually can defer. And I think last time we talked, you were telling me the extra granularity allows you to kind of prioritize things better. Is that the case? Can you explain kind of how this aligns to what you're doing with capital expenditures?
My group, the system planning group, looks at the whole Riverside electric system over a 5-year period to determine capital improvement projects. Well, the data we were looking at was just, as I mentioned earlier, was just so cumbersome and hard to access that it made the analytics and decision-making process very difficult. So we would only do it once a year because of the time-consuming effort to do it. Well, by introducing Pi data sets, we're able to access that granular data quickly and with very little effort by our engineers. So what we're doing now is our engineers are able to do their analytics and studies and be engineers instead of spending a lot of time looking at data. So as far as time savings, it is more efficient, and we're able to make our decisions quicker and better decision making instead of the old way that we were doing it, which is a lot of manual intensive efforts.
Okay. And is there anything new that you can tell us about, I guess, just the latest, maybe what kind of return on investment you're getting? You don't have to talk about dollars, but just how is the value of real-time data to you now as compared to, say, 2019, the last time we talked about this?
Yes. So we're looking at it now, as you mentioned, real-time, to where we're evaluating our system as conditions occur out in the field. So, during the summer months, we see a lot of solar PV activity on the system, and we were able to determine where the locations are, even though we don't have, the data of which homes or which businesses have solar, but with the data from Pi, we can identify regions where we have high PV penetration and make improvements to the system accordingly.
Okay. Well, let's check on that same issue in water. We're going to talk now to Robin Glenney. She's a water quality management. Hello, Robin.
Hello.
So what were you able to do with the Sensorbased data to help water quality?
In water operations, we use Pi in our blend model dashboard. We have about 50 groundwater wells. Some of them are treated through single stage or multiple stage processes of GAC, ion exchange, or membrane filtration, all which blend in our 3 transmission mains and then again at our 32 million gallon reservoir complex. And so the water quality blend coming in and going out to the distribution system is very important for compliance purposes, especially with PSPS events and power outages. The blend model dashboard has really helped us in operations manage what wells are turned on and off efficiently to make sure the water quality meets that final blend compliance.
Okay, great. Now I'm just kind of curious, did you find the system that you were working with easy to use? Did you find people were able to self-serve when it came to finding things that they needed with regard to water quality?
We did have an in-house water quality management database, but not very many people have access to it. And that's just the water quality data. This dashboard that's up real time for everybody to access, it takes that database through an API and integrates it with our SCADA flow meter data and displays it for everybody to see. So I think it's over 500 calculations running real time in the background for this dashboard that's available for all levels of management and whoever's interested.
Yeah, and when you say dashboard, I assume it's on the web, it's on mobile devices, pads, stuff like that?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, well, it's just, nowadays it's so ubiquitous, but you have to ask because that's the way people want it. Well, yeah, thank you so much.
I've got a question for Robin, just to follow up there. Mm-hmm. So, Robin, I was wondering, do you report those figures to the EPA or to a governing body automatically, or is that something in the future?
So we have several different reports that we have to send to the State Water Resources Control Board on a monthly basis for samples collected the previous month. And it was a very manual process previously. We've been able to automate, I would say, 98% of our reports with Pi Data Link. So just updating the date range, everything populates automatically into it. And then we just do a quick QC check, add some signatures, and they're ready to be emailed out to the state.
Thank you so much, Robin. So I'd like to introduce now Carey Tilden. He's a senior resource analyst. And I wanted to ask you, there's some fairly low-hanging fruit that people typically get when they have better access to their data. Can you describe some of the simple things people have been able to do to improve what they're doing?
Yeah, that's right. So, we have this training program that we've been running where we've, identified users from different departments and brought them in and gave them training on sort of basics, hoping that they could build on that or at the very least understand more about the technology. And so, we've had some really great successes out of that. We've had people building complicated Excel reports or even visual displays. We had one user who, in order to kind of practice from the training, he put together a display with call center data, which was the group that he was in, and it turned out to be such a good display that we used it to replace the one we had built and put it up on the screens for all the other customer service reps to see. So, we were extremely excited about that, and we love when we get a power user like that, right, who will kind of take it and run with it, and build tools that we don't have to build for them, right?
Brando and Carey, the enterprise agreement licensing model is unique. Can you let us know how that's made a difference?
Yeah, we're able to do the self-paced training, which is a lot of training that comes from OSI Soft. So we'll get things, we'll send people that direction, and because of our enterprise agreement, we have that is basically free now. And as we send people to things like that, and they start learning, and we start learning about other technologies or tools that are part of Pi because of the enterprise agreement. A lot of these things are readily available, and as soon as they start asking about it, then it's just a matter of applying it to their question and their concern. And so I think that's been a huge benefit. It reduces a lot of this downtime. Like, they showed interest and we get back to them a month later. No, we can get back to them immediately, and that's really awesome.
Yeah, so having the EA is really helpful, not just for getting access to the software, but also the whole suite of training that comes along with it. We can provide that to our people. We can also use it for us, right? We are fairly knowledgeable in the system, but we're not experts necessarily. And so when, especially, someone will bring us a solution or a possible solution, and we won't necessarily know how to solve it right away, but we can access the training material for our own uses. And additionally, the support is really great. And so when we reach, a dark corner of the system that we don't fully understand, we can kind of call in the experts and get some really great support in helping us solve problems and build new solutions and, move our own knowledge forward.
That's great. So one of the systems you're working with is putting data on ArcGIS maps. And to talk about that, we're going to bring in, let's introduce Marc Smith. He's a utilities principal analyst, and also Wes Wisniewski, a senior analyst. So either of you, I guess, if I can ask you, how has putting sensor-based data on the maps actually helped?
I'll go ahead and start. So about 10 years ago, we began the effort to really industrialize our data, to try and organize it, to get it out from this unstructured environment. It was within a SQL database, but we weren't doing a great job of organizing it. And so we spent a lot of time getting our data organized, and that stepped us into custom reporting, and we eliminated our paper-based process off of that custom reporting. And then, with every solution, you start to recognize that, yeah, this is great. This is a great step forward. But, when things got busy, right, if I have 60, 70 locations that are leaking and need to be repaired, or it's a Monday morning and we have a lot of phone calls coming in, list-based data starts to, become inefficient, right? You're starting to pick and choose and henpeck stuff out. And so we've kicked around this idea for a long time about, hey, this data is nice and structured, right? I got addresses on everything. What would happen if we, plot these on a map geospatially, right? We feel like we could really use the benefits, especially when things get busy. And it's been a game changer for us. We've recognized a lot of efficiencies just purely representing the data in a different function, to be able to see our work as it comes in, streamlined. My field staff owns and manages 100% of that data from the start of the process to the finish of it. And to see their efforts represented in a clean, concise, and effective manner, I think speaks well for our entire division. And like I said, just has produced all kinds of efficiencies from, where crews are located in relation to issues coming up, to customer complaints, to, being able to pick out your day and not spend your time driving from one side of the city to the other, and realize, like, hey, these three are right here. They may not be of the highest priority, but as far as our time efficiency is concerned, let's focus our efforts here today and get these knocked out. And that has really extrapolated into a bunch of different avenues for us. We were able to build a preemptive replacement program, just being able to view our data spatially. We've extended it out into other mapping for our public works departments. And, we're really working off this synergy associated with geospatial data and allowing our customer service center to see it. And so as calls are coming in, instead of having to spend the time to get a hold of somebody or try and send an email, they can pull this data up, see it just like we do. They can see the notes, they can see the progress, they can see when things are scheduled. And it's really eliminated a lot of this back and forth. And it's really allowed my group to focus on the most important thing, which is our customer service response. It's difficult, right? Your water goes out, it's 108 outside, right? It's something that needs to be fixed quickly. And so we recognize that it's created huge efficiencies for us, and really, it's allowed us to better serve our customers.
Okay, so Wes, tell me what technology do you have in place to make all this work?
Yeah, we use the Pi integrator for Esri to stream live data to the maps. We use either ArcGIS Online, or we have our in-house portal server. Historically, they would use paper-based maps that were static, and now they're having, web maps that are live and automated and near real time. Just the time efficiencies of staff being out in the field and physically seeing on a map, where new workers popping up.
So they used to see this in a tabular data. Now they can just see it on the map. That's what you're talking about?
Correct. They use like a laptop or a tablet.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. So let's talk to Ivan Velasco now. He's a power scheduler / trader. And I wanted to talk to you about your market operations system for trading energy. Can you just describe what that is?
Absolutely. It's basically just an accounting system that is run every hour. We look into the load for our system. We look into the imports into our system, and we look into any trades with other entities, whether they're bilateral or third party, and we run an analysis. Where do we stand? Are we short on energy? Are we long on energy? And what do we do on that following hour? Do we let the market take care of it, or can we shorten the position to be in a better financial outcome?
What improvements have you been able to make in how you do this over the years?
Yeah, so when I started working with market operations, everything was done manually. So at the beginning of the hour, we had to go to different softwares and grab load data. We had to grab import data. We had to grab weather data. Let me see what else. If we had any generation online, we had to grab generation from the different generators that we own. And that could take quite a significant amount. When we did the analysis, it was taking about 15 minutes on average to get all that data. And for a scheduler on a afternoon and a summer day, we don't have 15 minutes, especially when you have an outage at one of the interties or with one of your generators. You do not have 15 minutes because you should be looking for energy to replace that outage. And so it was very stressful, very time consuming. And once we were able to implement data link and all of our different data that we use into the spreadsheet, that cut the time of our input in by those 15 minutes. There's still some data that still has to be manually inputted, but it's a very minimum, and it's helped us greatly, especially with load.
Are you looking at predictive analytics in terms of what the demand's going to be to help with the market operations and trading?
Yeah, so that's something that's been discussed about utilizing Power BI in the future, and also trying to get away from the spreadsheets and just doing all of our operations and accounting in Power BI. So it's something in the long run.
Well, great. Well, our hour's almost up. Thank you so much. Before we move on, what's next? What are your future plans? Anything?
So our biggest priority right now is rolling out AMI and looking at ways we can use Pi to do that efficiently. So right now we're just getting finished with testing and ready to go live. And one of the ways we're using Pi is by gathering data from the AMI head-end system and the meter data management system in Pi to validate calculations and just kind of do that cross-check during testing. And then once we go live, we're going to be looking at Pi and relying on Pi to utilize for our operational efficiencies and our outage management, and how we can pull data from the AMI system, and now there's a lot more data than there used to be, and how we can provide that through Pi in useful dashboards to both engineering for system planning, and then also to operations for responding to outages and work that's going on or issues going on in the field.
Has this helped in just your better use of the data? Has it helped in any larger organizational goals? We hear people talk about sustainability goals or digital transformation, specific digital transformation projects branded your own way. Has it been helpful in those types of things?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we're always looking for ways to be more efficient, to be more resilient for that sustainability. So, Pi is a huge, like we said in the beginning, operational data management system. It's foundational for us to, move in the right direction in all those areas.
Right. Also, one more thing we love talking to people about nowadays, what have you been doing that may be different or helpful during the pandemic that you were able to accomplish with better access to your data?
Yeah, so for us in market operations, one of the things that took a huge impact is that before we were able to have 2 traders on the trading floor. After COVID, it was down to 1, and we had to spread the other ones around. And so by having Pi, we didn't have to physically exchange any schedules or any particular trading log. It all could be done through Pi and very easily accessed from multiple devices at the same time.
Nice.
And for us in water operations, we get a lot of data requests that come from our SCADA information. And to create space in the office, we were telecommuting or just trying to stay out of the office as much as possible to allow space for some of our operators and other staff that couldn't telecommute. So I was able to utilize Pi Data Link to fulfill a lot of those requests, whereas if we didn't have Pi, I would have to physically go in.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for filling this in, and thanks for taking the time to answer all these questions. Now, I want to spring something on you. I haven't talked to any of you about this yet, but we love doing a lightning round at the end of these interviews where we talk about the things that people only in operations can appreciate, the cultural things that go with working in operations.
Sure.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, I got to ask you, a lot of you are in operations, been there forever. Like a lot of folks in operations, do you have on your desk or somewhere a memento, which is like a broken valve or a burned out motherboard or something like that you keep for sentimental reasons or just as a remembrance?
It looks like Marc has an answer.
I mean, my entire office is collectible of broken computers and messed up pieces of copper and broken valves. I think my foot is on a hydrant check valve down here. So yeah, makes a great paperweight.
Oh, that's great. Well, we didn't see you. Thanks, Marc. Thank you for sharing. We didn't see your face during that, but thank you for sharing. How about this? In operations, this is something that I don't think anybody except folks in operations know, is you get to see sites that you just don't see anywhere else. And I imagine, some of you have done some nice work in some pretty disparate, just bizarre places around your physical facility. What's the most interesting scene you've ever seen or most interesting view you've ever seen?
I definitely have one for that.
Oh, who's that speaking? Is that Ivan?
That's Marc.
This is Marc.
Oh, go ahead, Marc.
About 3.5 years ago, our underground water vaults, the majority of what we put in the ground are traffic rated, but we have some older ones that we've been working to replace that aren't really close to traffic lanes, but were put in. They're fiberglass and they're not traffic rated in an area of our city which is not agricultural whatsoever. We had a horse fall into our vault that required the fire department to come out with a hoist to lift the horse out of the vault, and it has accelerated our replacement of fiberglass vaults. Quite a scene. Made the paper, Channel 7 News. It was an interesting day.
That's fascinating. And that's a nice... Oh, what's that?
I have something that's not nearly as exciting as what Marc just shared. But I know in our electric meter shop, we have a meter on display that was in a house fire, and it's there because the components all held up. Just the plastic cover melted, but it melted in the shape of the scream mask. And so it's kind of exciting.
Nice.
Okay. Well, speaking of horses, and maybe, as a public utility, maybe this isn't the best of questions, but I haven't seen an operating area yet that didn't have some strange wildlife that wanders on site all the time and just bedevils the people who are working there. What's the most common animal that you see just kind of getting into the works of what you all do for a living?
Well, I don't know. I've never seen this, but I do know that we often have poor little squirrels who give their lives upon our electric lines.
Oh, goodness.
It's even a cause in our outage management system.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, again, I can't thank everybody enough. We've been talking to the City of Riverside Public Utilities Department folks. I really appreciate you sharing this information with everybody, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. We'll see you in another 2 weeks. Bye-bye.